The words hit like a slap in the face. "Get this trash out of here before she embarrasses us all." Tariq Al-Fahad's voice cut through the elegant hum of the Riyadh restaurant, louder than 1,000 whispers. His words weren't just directed at Maya Richardson. They were aimed at everything she represented. She stood frozen, tray in hand, the eyes of every guest in the room burning into her. The crowd's laughter followed him like a dark wave, washing over her, suffocating her pride. Tariq, billionaire, owner of the lavish venue, leaned back in his chair, fingers gleaming with diamonds. His smug expression only deepened as he scanned her from head to toe, like she wasn't even worth the space she took up in his world. He stood, stepping toward her with deliberate steps, the clicking of his polished shoes echoing across the marble floor. With one hand, he snatched the Black Centurion card from Maya's tray. In one fluid motion, he slammed it onto the floor, grinding the 5,000 limit card beneath his designer shoe like a forgotten cigarette. The sound of the card being crushed reverberated in the quiet of the room. Laughter exploded from the crowd. "This is what happens when you don't know your place," Tariq sneered. "Your kind doesn't deserve real money, let alone be in my restaurant." Maya stood still, her back straight. She clenched her jaw, but not a single tremor showed in her hands. Her eyes, calm, met his, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Tariq adjusted his cufflinks, his gaze never leaving her. He relished the power he wielded. "What's the matter, girl? Can't speak a word of Arabic? Prove me wrong." His voice dripped with mockery. "If you speak better Arabic than me, I'll hand you $100,000. But if you can't, well, then I'll have you tossed out of here like the trash you are." The guests stirred, their whispers louder now, eyes darting between the two of them. They were waiting for her to crumble, for her to bow down under the weight of his wealth, his reputation. Maya's heart hammered in her chest, but she didn't move. She felt the heat of their gaze, the anticipation in the air. But it wasn't fear that gripped her. It was something else, something much deeper. She had nothing to prove to these people. Not a single word would come from her lips unless she chose it. Tariq, still grinning, didn't notice. He was basking in the attention, in the control. "Well," he leaned in closer, his voice lowering almost to a whisper. "Are you afraid? You can't even speak your own language, can you?" The pressure mounted. Maya glanced at the marble floor where the card had been crushed. It wasn't the first time something precious had been stomped on in front of her. But this time she wouldn't walk away. Not without a fight. She took a step forward, the weight of the room on her shoulders, her breath steady, unshaken. Then quietly she spoke. "You've made a mistake, Tariq." The room went dead silent. The laughter stopped. No one knew what to expect next. Tariq's grin faltered, confusion flickering in his eyes. He took a step back. "What did you say?" Maya didn't respond immediately. Her gaze never wavered from his. She stood her ground. There was no fear in her eyes. There was only the calm before a storm. And with that, the game was set. The restaurant felt colder now, the laughter of the guests replaced by an uneasy stillness. Maya stood there, every eye in the room locked on her, waiting for the next move. Tariq had thought he could crush her with one simple comment, a show of wealth and power. But in that brief moment, he had underestimated her. And now the game had changed. "Well?" Tariq's voice sliced through the silence, a challenge thrown like a gauntlet. His eyes were sharp, expectant, almost mocking. "Say something." "Prove me wrong." Maya didn't move. She didn't need to. The power once entirely in his hands was slipping. The eyes of the crowd shifted, unsure, waiting for her to break. Her thoughts were calm, like a silent lake. It wasn't fear that held her still. It was precision. Every move mattered. She knew that. In a game of wealth and reputation, one misstep could be catastrophic. But it was his misstep first. The crushed card. Her fingers tightened around her tray, a quiet signal to herself. She was in control. "Why don't you speak then?" He taunted again, his voice louder this time, laced with frustration. "Or are you really as stupid as you look?" The crowd shifted, muttering, their eyes flicking between the two of them. Maya felt their judgment like a weight pressing on her chest, but her eyes were calm, her movements slow and deliberate. She wasn't about to make this easy for him. Do you want me to prove myself, Tariq? Maya finally spoke, her voice calm but carrying. What would you do if I did? For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of crystal glasses clinking in the background, the hum of distant conversations. The guests exchanged glances, the tension rising like smoke in the air. Tariq's arrogant smile faltered for the briefest second. Prove it. But you'll lose, he said, his voice dripping with smug confidence, because you can't speak Arabic. Not like I can. And you'll never match me. Maya didn't flinch, not even when the entire room seemed to hold its breath. We'll see, was all she said. The room fell into a strange silence. People whispered in hushed tones. It was a spectacle now, a performance. Tariq had challenged her, but it wasn't just about language anymore. It was about respect. It was about dignity. And those were things Tariq didn't understand. Maya turned, her gaze scanning the crowd for just a moment, before fixing on Tariq once more. Let's play your game, she said, her tone steady, as if she were agreeing to something simple. But the weight behind those words wasn't lost on anyone. Tariq smirked, clearly pleased by her compliance. But there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes, one that no one else noticed. He still didn't get it. This wasn't a game of words for her. This was about much more. Maya stepped closer to him, her heart beating steadily. The clock was ticking, the tension building. She knew what she had to do next, and it wasn't going to be easy. But it was going to be necessary. Tariq leaned back in his chair, confident. Go on. Say something impressive, he challenged. And in that moment, Maya realized one crucial thing. He had already lost. The game wasn't about language. It was about the quiet strength inside her, the calmness that no one could break. And Tariq had no idea what he was walking into. Her hand, steady and sure, reached into her pocket. The silence hung heavy in the air. The crowd waited, breath held. Then she spoke. I've got one better than words. And in that moment, everyone in the room knew something was about to change. The room was eerily silent as Maya stepped forward. Her hands steady, her eyes locked on Tariq. His mocking grin remained in place, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes now, something that hadn't been there before. Go on, Tariq sneered. Impress me. Maya didn't respond immediately. She stood, poised, her gaze shifting from him to the crowd, sensing the shift in the energy of the room. They were all watching, waiting for her to fail. She could almost feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on her. But it didn't matter. She had long learned to ignore the noise. Let me show you something, she said, her voice low, yet cutting through the tension like a blade. Without another word, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, tapping it quickly. Your language challenge? She asked, her eyes never leaving Tariq. This one's for you. Tariq's brow furrowed in confusion. What is this? Maya's fingers moved swiftly across the screen, the glow of the phone illuminating her face for a brief moment. She tapped a button, and her voice filled the room, smooth, confident, fluent. Fluent Arabic flowed from her lips with an ease that silenced the room. The change was immediate. Tariq froze, his arrogant smile faltering, his eyes widening in disbelief. The crowd, once jeering and skeptical, fell silent, watching in awe. The tension that had been palpable moments before shifted. Maya wasn't just proving her command of the language. She was revealing something much more powerful. Tariq opened his mouth to speak but stopped short, not knowing what to say. You speak Arabic? His voice was almost a whisper now, laced with confusion. But you're not what you expected? Maya cut him off, her words calm, measured, but now carrying weight. She paused, letting the words hang in the air before continuing. I never said I couldn't speak it. I just didn't feel the need to entertain you. The shift in the room was almost tangible. The guests who had once ridiculed her, who had laughed and whispered, now leaned forward, their eyes trained on Maya. Some were still in disbelief, but others were beginning to understand. Tariq, who had been so sure of his superiority just moments ago, now stood at the center of his own humiliation. His posture had shifted, his cocky confidence cracked, replaced by something unspoken. He didn't know how to handle this. Maya had thrown his game right back at him, silently, effortlessly, But she wasn't finished. She lowered her phone, the words on it echoing in the quiet room. "Let me remind you, Tariq, I didn't come here for your approval." Her gaze remained locked on his, unwavering. "I came here because you thought you could break me with a few words. But it's you who's being exposed now." The crowd held its breath, no one daring to speak, as if they were afraid to interrupt the delicate moment unfolding before them. But Maya was undeterred. She turned her attention to the room, her eyes sweeping across the guests. "I've spent my life being underestimated. People like you, people who think wealth and arrogance give them power, they never even consider what's underneath the surface." She took a step forward, her voice steady, her presence commanding. "But let me tell you something. Power isn't about how much money you have or how loud you shout. It's about knowing who you are and standing tall no matter how much they try to knock you down." The words lingered in the air, hanging like a challenge. Maya didn't need to yell or make a scene. She was calm, collected, and every word she spoke carried a quiet authority that Tariq couldn't ignore. For a moment, no one moved. The silence was heavy, suffocating. The crowd was still processing what had just happened. Tariq, who had been so certain that this would be his moment of dominance, was now uncertain. The smugness wiped clean from his face. He stood in front of Maya, exposed, his arrogance unraveled. Maya took another step back, the tension in her chest easing as the power shifted. She was in control now, and she hadn't said a word more than necessary. Tariq's next words came out in a stutter. I didn't—" Maya raised a hand, not out of anger, but to stop him. "Don't bother," she said, her voice gentle but firm. She turned to the guests, her gaze shifting from one face to another. No one dared to speak. "Your game," Maya continued, "was never mine to play." She gave one final glance at Tariq, a slight smile pulling at the corner of her lips. "But now you know what real strength looks like." And with that, she turned, walking away from the stunned crowd. The restaurant felt different now, quiet, unsettled, as if the ground had shifted beneath everyone's feet. But Maya wasn't done. "Not yet. The storm was just beginning. You think I'm afraid of you?" Tariq's voice cracked, a mix of frustration and disbelief. He leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing on Maya, as if his proximity could intimidate her. The crowd waited for his next move, hanging on his every word. The tension was thick in the air, like it was just a matter of time before something broke. Maya stood there unfazed, her back straight, her eyes locked on his. There was no fear, no hesitation, just quiet confidence. The mockery had been drained from her posture, leaving only a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. And she wasn't afraid to play the game, even if it meant flipping the rules upside down. "I'm not here to scare you," she replied calmly, almost too calmly. Her voice was steady, like water cutting through rock. "I'm here to end this." The crowd's murmurs grew louder. They weren't sure who they were watching anymore, the smug billionaire or the underdog who had suddenly shifted the entire dynamic in the room. Tariq's lips curled into a sneer. "You think you can outsmart me in front of everyone? You're nothing but a waitress, Maya. This is my world, not yours." His words cut through the room like a knife. They all knew it. He was the one with the wealth, the connections, the power. Maya was just a face in the crowd. And yet here she was, standing tall and unshaken. "Do you honestly think the amount of money in your bank account defines your value?" Maya asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Let me tell you something, Tariq. Money doesn't make you important. The way you treat others does." Her words landed heavily, sinking into the silence between them. The crowd felt it. The shift in the room was undeniable. They had been waiting for Maya to cower, to back down. But instead she was forcing them to look at the world differently. Tariq let out a bitter laugh. "You're starting to sound like one of those motivational speakers. You think you can win this? You're in way over your head." For the briefest moment, Maya's gaze flickered to the corner of the room. A subtle movement, but it didn't go unnoticed. She saw a familiar face, a figure she knew from her past, one that carried a reputation far beyond this room. An outsider ally, a respected figure in the business world, someone who had crossed paths with both of them in the past. As the crowd noticed her glance, they followed her lead. Slowly, the atmosphere began to shift. The whispers began again, but this time they weren't about her. They were about him, Tariq, the millionaire who had made the fatal mistake of underestimating her. The outsider ally, a politician named Ahmed, stood up from his seat. His gaze was sharp, cutting through the tension as he made his way toward the table, his eyes never leaving Maya's. "I believe this is my cue," Ahmed said, his voice steady but commanding as he took a seat beside Maya. "I've seen a lot of people like you, Tariq, and I've seen many who, despite all their wealth, can't understand the simplest truths of life." Tariq blinked, thrown off guard. He was used to control, to people being afraid of his wealth. He wasn't prepared for someone standing up to him, especially not someone like Maya. Maya didn't flinch. She remained composed, even as the outsider ally placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity. The crowd's whispers were now louder, unsure of where this was going, but drawn into the growing storm. Tariq was losing control, and it was becoming clearer by the second. Tariq finally recovered, sneering at Ahmed. "You think your words will change anything? You've been played, just like everyone else here." He turned back to Maya, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're nothing more than a pawn in a game you don't even understand." But Maya, still calm, still composed, simply raised an eyebrow. "The game has already begun," she said softly, "and I'm not playing by your rules anymore." A moment of silence passed. And then it happened. Maya's eyes flicked to the chessboard in front of her. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. With a slow, deliberate motion, she moved her piece, setting a trap. The crowd, sensing the shift, leaned in. Tariq didn't see it at first, too focused on trying to maintain his dominance over her. His laugh returned, louder this time, more confident. "You really think you've got me? Your move was a joke. Watch." He moved one of his own pieces, no doubt intending to dismiss her play as a rookie mistake. But the moment his piece left the square, Maya's trap snapped shut. A wave of realization washed over Tariq's face. He froze, his hand still hovering over the board. He glanced at the piece she had just moved, then back to the board, and his expression faltered. The trap was set. And it was perfect. For the first time, he looked uncertain, his confidence cracked. The crowd, once so ready to cheer for him, shifted. They watched, now waiting to see if Maya could finish what she started. But the moment wasn't just about the game. It was about something much larger, about power, humility, and who truly controlled the board. Tariq's face darkened. "This isn't over!" Maya's lips curled into a slight smile, but her eyes remained cold and focused. "Oh, it's just getting started," and with that, the trap was set, and the game was on. Checkmate. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap, shocking everyone in the room. Tariq's hand froze over his piece. He couldn't move. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape, for some way out of the trap Maya had set. But it was too late. There was no more room to run, no more moves to make. The crowd fell into stunned silence. A few people gasped, unsure if they had heard her correctly. But there it was, clear as day on the chessboard. Tariq was finished. Maya leaned back in her chair, her eyes never leaving the millionaire's face. Her calmness was almost unnerving. While everyone else had expected her to falter, to make a mistake, she had done the opposite. She had outsmarted him at his own game. The quiet genius was no longer a secret. Tariq's jaw tightened as he stared at the board. He clenched his fists, trying to hold on to the last remnants of his pride. "This is impossible," he muttered, barely audible. "How did you—" Maya didn't answer right away. Instead, she let the moment linger, the tension thickening in the room. She could feel the weight of the crowd's gaze, but she didn't flinch. "It's not about how," she said slowly, her voice low and firm. "It's about understanding the game better than anyone else." She stood up, her eyes finally shifting away from the board to meet Tariq's gaze. "You thought you could humiliate me. Thought I was just some worker, someone beneath you. But you didn't see me. You didn't see what I've been through." Her words pierced through the silence like a knife. Tariq's face darkened, his arrogance crumbling. The billionaire's world had just been turned upside down, and he wasn't sure how to respond. "I didn't want this. Maya continued, her voice growing stronger, more resolute. But you left me no choice. You pushed me, mocked me, and in the end, you underestimated me. That was your biggest mistake. The crowd, once skeptical and mocking, had shifted. Their whispers had quieted, replaced by a palpable sense of awe. It was happening. The underdog was winning. Tariq finally spoke, but his words were empty. You think this means anything? His voice trembled with frustration. This is just a game. I can buy my way out of anything. You've only delayed the inevitable. Maya's lips curled into a faint smile. You're right. This is just a game. But you've lost. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. And now, everyone here knows who the real winner is. Tariq glanced around the room, his once adoring guests now staring at him with a mix of disbelief and something else. Disappointment. They were starting to see the cracks in his facade. The billionaire's arrogance, once so overwhelming, was now exposed for what it was, hollow and fragile. The outsider ally, Ahmed, leaned forward, his voice cutting through the tension. Well played, Maya. Well played indeed. Tariq's eyes snapped to Ahmed, and for the first time a flicker of doubt crossed his face. You can't be serious, he stammered, trying to regain control of the situation. This isn't over. I'll find a way to turn this around. But Maya wasn't done. She wasn't just playing to win. She was playing to expose him for who he truly was, an arrogant, entitled man who thought his wealth could shield him from the truth. You can't buy your way out of this, Maya said, her voice steady as she moved toward the center of the room. What happened here today isn't about money. It's about respect. It's about knowing that no matter how high you think you are, you can always fall. You just never expected it would be someone like me who would bring you down. The crowd shifted again, this time with admiration. They were no longer laughing at her. They weren't looking at her like the invisible woman who served them their meals. They were seeing her finally for who she truly was, a force to be reckoned with. Tariq's hands shook slightly as he pushed his chair back, but he didn't stand. He couldn't. He had been defeated, publicly, and there was no way to hide from it now. You think you've won? He sneered, his voice weak. This doesn't change anything. Maya stared at him, her expression unreadable. It changes everything. And with that, she turned away, leaving him in the midst of his shattered pride. The room had gone silent once more, but this time the silence wasn't filled with disbelief. It was filled with awe, with respect. As Maya walked out, the final blow landed. Tariq's empire of arrogance had crumbled, and the underdog had risen, not with vengeance, but with the quiet power of someone who knew their worth. The crowd slowly began to murmur, their voices rising in conversation. This wasn't just a game. This was a moment where the underdog had finally taken their place among giants. And as the whispers grew, one thing was clear. Maya had just changed everything. Tariq was left standing in the ashes of his own hubris, the room now filled with nothing but the echo of his defeat. As Maya walked out, the final blow landed. Tariq's empire of arrogance had crumbled, and the underdog had risen, not with vengeance, but with the quiet power of someone who knew their worth. The crowd slowly began to murmur, their voices rising in conversation. This wasn't just a game. This was a moment where the underdog had finally taken their place among giants. And as the whispers grew, one thing was clear. Maya had just changed everything. Tariq was left standing in the ashes of his own hubris, the room now filled with nothing but the echo of his defeat. If you're inspired by Maya's story of resilience and triumph, then it's time to make your own voice heard. Don't let anyone define your limits or your worth. Share your own story. Stand up, show up, and let the world see what you're made of. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of real people rising against all odds, hit that subscribe button. Follow the movement of powerful voices that are changing the game. Share this story and help amplify those who've been silenced for too long. This is just the beginning. Together we rise.